Hi, so I just wanted to give my experience on the ARCT piano exam, basically what I did, and just some tips in general, because I didn't see many videos online about how to prepare for it. So, first of all, I prepared for this exam for about 2 years, and I'm talking about 2 school years around. So I prepared this while I was in high school. I prepared for this exam while I was in high school, and I went to a very regular high school, so I didn't have that much time to practice. I practiced for in the first year, about 1 hour every day. Could be more or less, but I want to tell you guys that for the second year, I really didn't have that much time to practice. I was extremely busy with school. Some days I couldn't even practice. Honestly, I think for my second year, my practice time was around a few hours per week. Let's say 4 hours, around 4 hours a week, which I would not recommend if you are trying to prepare for this exam, but I really did not have a choice. But then, so I took this exam in August of this year, 2024, and in July, which is a month before my exam, maybe about 2 months, because my exam was in late August. In July, and of course in August, I practiced for about 2 hours a day, and I was really consistent with it. And I had weekly piano lessons all year round for 2 years, which were 75 minutes each. And for the exam, which I took in late August, I had to drive to a different city, because actually I didn't drive there, my parents did. But the day that the exam was available in my city, I was going to go on vacation, so I just had to drive to a different city to do it. And the exam lasted a bit less than an hour, about 55 minutes, I would say. And I had a little water break in the middle of it, in the middle of my exam. And you know how you need to have, let's see, list A, B, C, D, E, F, if I remember correctly, you have to play 6 pieces, and one of them's a concert etude. You can actually choose the order of which pieces you want to play. I think most people go in order, like they play their list A, and then list B, C, D, E, and perhaps they play their concert etude last. What I did was I played it first. So play the concert etude first, and then followed by list A, B, C, D, and E. So that's 6 pieces in total. And I got a 90 for this exam, which I was pretty surprised by, because I didn't play my best, but I guess it wasn't too bad. Now, moving on to what I did, I just want to give you some really specific details on exactly what I did to prepare for this exam. So maybe you guys can think about if some of these will work for you. And yeah, so I did the exam at the end of August, and I actually had these pieces, almost all of them memorized a year before, or even older than that. I actually had to change my List C piece since I didn't like the one that I chose beforehand. And I also had to change my concert etude, and I think I memorized that about 8 months before my exam. So you should definitely try to memorize your piece at least 1 year before your exam, so that you have time to sort of forget about some things about your pieces, because if you're playing the same thing for 2 years straight every day, it's kind of I think it will drive you insane unless you really, really like those pieces. So yeah, what I did was, after I memorized all of my pieces, I would have some months where I would just focus on a few of them. So I would not even play. Like, I would play them, but I wouldn't work on them very much. I wouldn't work on some of my pieces compared to some other ones, and then I would kind of rotate it because I didn't want to focus equally on each piece. And I think it's really hard to focus equally on each piece, which is kind of what you have to do at the exam. Each piece has to be equally as good as the other ones. So during the first year, I participated in some music festivals, which is just where you perform your pieces and then a judge gives you some feedback. And I think I did this for most of my pieces during the first year, and that was great. And for the second year, I also did these festivals, but I was so busy with school, I could only play 2 of my pieces. And I don't really regret this because festivals are honestly quite stress-inducing. So yeah, I played 2 of my pieces for the second year. And now I'll talk about what I did kind of daily. And this is only going to be applicable for the month of July and a few weeks before my exam, because before that I really didn't practice very well for like 1 school year. So then I had to really lock in July and August before my exam. And I think that was okay for me because I already had a pretty strong base on the pieces. I memorized them like a year earlier, so I could just not practice them correctly for September to June, and then for July, like, I actually had to lock in. So what I did was that I practiced every day for around 2 hours. It was around 2 hours every single day. I didn't skip any days. And I kept this notebook where I would write exactly what I wanted to practice, so that when I was going to practice, I could really stay focused. So I did, some days I would write what I wanted to practice for the next day, and some days I would write it right before I was going to practice. I wrote exactly which measures I was going to practice for which piece. You know, you have 6 pieces, so you can't practice all of them in 2 hours. So I would be like, okay, so today I want to do a run through of this one piece. and then I want to focus on a few measures and making sure they're solid. It was mostly technical things, to be honest, because musically, when I went to my piano lessons, my teacher would help me a lot on that, so I would have a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to do. And another thing that I did very, very, very frequently was record myself playing. Mostly just audio. I got this app that I'll link it in the description, but it's basically a very simple app where you can just record yourself playing, and then it will play it back to you, and then the next time you record that piece, it will delete it for you unless you want to save that recording. And I think recording yourself is very, very useful, because when you're just playing, you can't hear yourself very objectively. So I think when you record yourself, it really helps. And then what I did was around once a week or twice a week, I would stream my program on this app called HelloTalk, which is actually a language exchange app, but I used it to stream my piano program, like my whole program. Sometimes just my practice too, but mostly just my whole program, because I wanted to get some performance practice of playing the whole program in one sitting. And while I was doing this, for me, my main problem was mentally, I was not very confident in my performance ability. And I know I have a lot of stage fright. So I wanted to work on that because my teacher couldn't help me with that. So what I did was I read 2 books kind of relating to it. One of them is by Jeeyoon, and it's called Whenever You're Ready, How to Compose the Life of Your Dreams. And the other one, I think it was called Performance Success by Greene. I didn't actually finish that book, but I finished the one by Jeeyoon. I'll link them both in the description, and yeah, I would say it was pretty helpful in helping me be mentally prepared for this, because the physical preparation is one thing, and then the mental preparation is another. Another thing I did was that before I started practicing my 2 hours, I would do some mental practice for about 10 minutes. So I would also write this down in my notebook. But for example, I would imagine myself starting my piece in the church, because usually the piano recitals and the exam is going to be in a church. So I would just lie down on my back and then hear in my head the piece, and then feel the keys, and then just try to very vividly create the image of me being in the church playing the piece, so that when I actually did the recital, it would feel somewhat familiar since I imagined it so vividly in my head. And I would do that for 10 minutes, sometimes with recordings, so I didn't have to use too much of my brain to imagine the sound, and sometimes just without any recording. So I would imagine the sound of the piece in my head. And at last, I participated in piano camp, and it's just a camp where you can play piano for different teachers, and then they would give you feedback, and you have lots and lots and lots of performance opportunities, like almost every day. And I did that about 1 week before my exam. That was incredibly helpful because, when you're practicing by yourself, that's one thing, and then playing it for someone else, that's another completely different skill. So I was able to have a lot of practice with that. And then I'm pretty sure almost exactly 1 week before my exam, I held my own piano recital at a church. Honestly, I invited just my piano teacher students, and I think about 10 people came. Like, not a lot of people, but that's not the point. The point was that I had to run through my whole program in my dress and play it from start to end, and imagine that was the actual exam. And I think that was also pretty helpful, since I was able to play through my whole program without stopping and just simulating the actual exam. Now, the tips I would give, I don't have that many, but I think it's pretty dependent on the person, because each person, they have their strengths and their weaknesses, and you need to know yourself exactly what you need to work on. And I think this is pretty easy, because if you already got to this level, you probably know exactly what you need to work on, whether it be musicality, technique, performance anxiety, these kind of things. You'll know your weakness, and you need to try and find a solution. So my first tip would be not to practice more than 2 hours a day, because personally, I think 2 hours is the perfect amount of time to do one thing. 1 hour is a bit too short, and then longer than 2 hours, I think, it's hard to stay focused, and your fingers, they're gonna feel a bit tired. So personally, I think practicing more than 2 hours will not help, though I'm sure many people will disagree on this. And my second tip would be to perform the whole program often, from start to end. So that takes about an hour, depending on which pieces you chose. I'll also tell you guys what pieces I chose in the description. So you need to perform it often, preferably to your friends or to a real person, but if you're like me, and I did perform this to my friends a couple of times, but performing the whole program, I don't think they would be very interested in listening to the whole thing. So what I did, I just streamed it on HelloTalk, which is an app, a language learning app, definitely not for this. But yeah, I wanted to find a way where I could perform the whole entire program, 1 hour long, and have people just listen to it. I would say try to perform it once a week in the last month. And then my third tip would be to keep a notebook and plan your practice, because before I did this, I couldn't keep track of what I did and what I needed to work on, because there's 6 pieces, and each piece, there's a lot of things to work on, especially list A and B. Especially list B, it's kind of intense because there's 3 movements usually. So make sure to keep a notebook so you can keep track of what you need to work on and what you already did, I would just date them. So I would see, like, yesterday, what did I work on? And then the next day I would be able to plan my practice better because I already knew what I worked on and what I didn't. And my last tip is just to trust yourself. I know it's really hard, but I have extreme performance anxiety. It's really, really extreme. Like, my legs would shake, my fingers would shake, and my brain wouldn't be able to think at all. I would be on autopilot playing my piece. I didn't know where I was. I was so scared of just making a mistake and then my teacher getting mad at me, and just the shame of making a mistake. So I don't know if you guys can relate, but my biggest concern was a memory slip. I was just petrified that I would have a memory slip and I wouldn't be able to continue. And I just want to say that memory slips, they can happen, but the important thing is that even though that they do happen, they're very unlikely to happen. Because imagine this, you practiced every day for like 2 hours and you did so many run-throughs, and you know that when you play it to yourself, you can get through it and focus on the musicality and things like that. So it doesn't really make sense to have a memory slip so big that you cannot continue. So what I did, I just had to think about this to myself. I had to think about just the unlikeliness of having a memory slip, because they do happen, but it's really unlikely. So that shouldn't really be the biggest concern. The biggest concern, I think, would be to stay focused and to try to convey the message that you were working on for 2 years. And just some tips on memory would be you should be able to start on any measure in any of your pieces. What I did was I would just try to start from random measures and see if I was able to start there. And of course, the usual tips of finding places in your piece where you 100% know how to play if you forget somewhere else. It could be like one spot per page. And I think the biggest thing that would help, even though it's really scary, is just exposing yourself, exposure therapy. Like, just keep playing your program to other people and try to do this as frequently as you can. Like, ideally, like 3 times a day or something, because the shorter the increments of time that you leave between doing these things, it will help more, because you just need your body to realize that everything's fine. Because you can think in your brain that you know it's gonna go fine, but your body doesn't know it yet. And stage fright and performance anxiety, it's something you can't control. So you kind of just have to live with it and play your best while you're in that fight or flight state. But if you really want to improve this, you just have to do it more often and realize, let your body realize that it's safe and that nothing bad is going to happen if you mess up. Nothing bad is going to happen if you have a memory slip. So I hope this helps. and good luck on your exam.